All right, in this project, we're going to take what you did in Figma and we're going to translate that and do styling on it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give you the initial HTML file. One of the things that we did here is that we pretty well organized it in our last demonstration that you should have done so that you could kind of envision how the HTML would be. Instead of you writing all of it from scratch, what we're going to do is I'm going to provide you with the actual HTML file, and then we're going to style it together so that you can see how something like this could be done. Now, when you download it from Canvas, you're going to download a site that is the XD website, and when you and it'll be in a zip file called the starter, and when you download it, what you'll get is, when you unzip it, I should say, you're going to see something that looks like this. It's going to be XD website, and inside of it will be the HTML project folder, and this is the folder, this HTML project folder that is right here, is the one that you would in fact make as your page, or excuse me, as your site root folder in Phoenix Code or whatever editor you might be using. And at the time of getting started, the file is going to be all HTML. You also have a file folder that is the images, and it's already got everything in there that you need, and it's based all on the same stuff that we used for the Figma sketch. And then we also have a style sheet, and you'll see that it has some stuff, but it's mostly empty. So first of all, let's take a look at what it is that we're going to do, and we can just, as a reminder, just look at this Figma file. If you didn't do the Figma file, then you can still work on this, but it's going to be based off of the visuals that we set up in the previous assignment for this Figma file. So you can go ahead and get started on this and still follow along and do this with us. So, all right, if you take a look, as a reminder, what we have here is we have this header intro. In fact, what I'm going to do, I should have done in my document, I thought I did, but I didn't. I should put that at the top because that's actually at the top. So I would drag that layer up to the top, and that's where I would want that to be. And then we can look inside of it, and you can see that we have this H1, and that is actually a branding image. And you might look at that and go, wow, that's a lot of text, and it's an image. How is that going to be an H1? We're going to cover that, and you'll see that in the HTML document, and then we'll talk about how we can do something that is referred to as an image replacement technique. And it's for ADA accessibility, and people are still doing that. It's been done for a long time now, and for a while people stopped doing it, but people are doing it again because they really like to have curated visual experience with their SVG files, for instance. Okay, and then we also had our navigation, and then this is our background image, this line's background, and then so on and so on. And then we have this about section, which is next, and then down here is the register section, and starts off save the date. We have a speakers section, agenda section. And when I say section, I actually mean it is a section in HTML, so it's a section tag. We have a location section, an event sponsors section, and finally the footer, which is not a section, it's just the footer. Okay, so let's get started. First, you're going to go ahead and jump into your Phoenix Code editor. And if you open it up, it might prompt you to do something that's the default, or to start a new project or something like that. If you were to jump into the default, all you need to do is go over to default right here, or whatever this happens to say. Maybe it was the last project that you chose, but definitely you need to do this. Go here, and then you're going to say open folder, and you're going to find the folder that let's find the actual folder. Hold on a second. I'm going to navigate to where I downloaded it, which is going to be on my desktop in my MAT 125 folder. And then, as I mentioned before, I unzipped it. I unzipped this thing called XD d website starter.zip. When I decompressed it, it created this folder called xd website. Down inside of that is an HTML project folder. So I'm going to make the HTML project folder my root. I'm going to click on open. And then what that will do is you can see over here on the left it changed. I have an images folder, and you can see all my picture files in there. I have an index file, and I have my style sheet. So let's do a couple of things. First of all, let's go ahead and we're going to, right now we don't have any, we hardly have any styles. We have some, and I'll go over those in a minute. But right now, let's just take a quick peek at how the HTML file is set up. So you'll notice right off the bat that on the right in the display view that it's not styled, right? It's just a bunch of structure, and that's fine. It might feel overwhelming at first, but we've been through this before, right? And so you're going to see that we can get it done. So over here on the left, and let me make this bigger so that you can see it a little bit better, and I'll scoot this over for the display view. Over here on the left is what we've got for the HTML. And so for the sake of time, I went ahead and I just created it so that the head of the document has everything in it that you need. In fact, it even has a link to a script file that does not exist yet. If we decide later to create one, then we'll call it script.js, and that's fine. In the meantime, what we want to take a look at is this part that says a viewport. This is the part that is going to make it so that, let's blow it up a little bit more. This part is what's going to make it responsive on mobile devices. This is required. It's something that if you don't have this particular line, Google will penalize your website and rankings. So it needs to make sure always that you have the name equals viewport, excuse me, content width equals device width, and we have the initial scale set up to 1.0, and then that means that it will match the device's resolution properly. And if it's a mobile device, it recognizes that, and then it will also correctly show it. Otherwise, it's going to look like a desktop and look tiny on a mobile phone. Then we're linking to our style sheet, which it might look like there are no styles, but there are. It's this style sheet right here. Okay. And then also there's another style sheet here that is for the toolkit, the type kit. And actually, you know what? I just realized that really should come first. So I'm going to cut that. Let's just go ahead and fix this right now. Let's put that right there. It should load the fonts before I try to use the fonts in this style sheet. So let's make sure that we've got the type kit coming first. That's my bad, but that's okay because it gives me an opportunity to remind you about the order of operations. Okay? Now, so that's what's in the head. And then in the body, this is where we're going to start talking about the body, and that is the stuff that you see in the display viewport. We're going to have a header. Let's collapse the areas first, and we're going to look at the overview of this. So first of all, we have our header. That is something that definitely we did do in Figma, just as the header. And that is also true of the footer, which is something that we also did specifically in Figma. Now, what we didn't do in Figma is we didn't wrap a bunch of those sections inside of the main tag. That's just something that is a good practice, and that's what's happening here. So if we open that up, you'll see that there are all these different sections which we can collapse just to take a peek, just at a glance. And there we go. And then you would notice that if we were to take a look and we compare those to what we have over here, then you will see that we have our header in Figma called intro, and then here we've done our header whose ID is intro. And then forget about this thing right here. Don't worry about that right now. We'll get to that later. That's something that I added after the fact. And then we have our section about, and that tracks over here on the left in Figma. And then in Figma, you can see section ID equals required, or excuse me, register, not required, register. We have that. And then the next is speakers. Same is true over here in Figma. Then agenda, which we have. Then location and sponsors, which we also have. And then down below is your footer, which we also have. Okay, so those are the main components, the main divisions that we have in our document. So with that understanding, we're going to focus first in our next video when we get started. We're going to focus first on this part, doing the header. Excuse me. Before that, however, I'm just going to really quickly jump over here to the style sheet. And in fact, what we'll go ahead and do before we even get started with that is we can go up here to view, and this is in Phoenix Code, and we're going to do a vertical split. Actually, sorry, let's do a horizontal split. Well, that's up to you how you want to do it. I think that I will do a horizontal split. Yeah, there we go. So that the HTML is going to be on the top, and then if I click down here and put my lower pane in focus just by clicking in it, then I can select the styles.css file, and then it'll show up over here. Okay, and then the other thing that I'm going to do just to kind of set the space up a little bit better is that I'm going to launch the display view that I've got right here. I'm going to launch that by clicking this little pop-out button, and I'm going to launch that into a different browser altogether. Okay, and then I'll move this over, make it a little bit smaller, and then we can also do the same thing here, but then that way, not having it tethered, then we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we can move our stuff around. Okay, so just real quickly, let me show you the style sheet, and we're going to also be learning something a little bit new here. And I went ahead and I set it up so that we can just talk about it in, when we get going in our styles. But essentially, there is a variable system that CSS does allow you to use where you can set colors to variable names, and then later you can just use them as variable names. And what is the benefit of that? The benefit is that sometimes it's a lot easier to remember when something looks gray that we call it gray instead of calling it 444, or even better yet, if we have a specific color of this kind of hot pink magenta, then we just call it magenta if that's what it looks like, instead of using this hexadecimal number that's a lot harder to remember. Same with this gold color, this kind of wheat color. These are just made up names. These are not to be confused with the actual CSS predetermined names. For instance, like I think that the word wheat actually is an HTML CSS hexadecimal value that is recognized. This is not the same value. This is a variable that I have created. So don't let that be confusing to you. Okay. I could have called that maroon, but it's more of a plum color, maybe a wine color. Anyway, but you can come up with names that make sense to you. I already have some that are predefined, and when you see them, or when we use them later, I'll show you that you can just, for instance, if we were to give the font the basic color for the text on the page, if we wanted to make the basic color on the page be a gray color, for instance, then we could look at this up here and we can see that we spelled it G-R-A-Y as opposed to G-R-E-Y, which sometimes I do. But if we come down here, we could tell it that we want for the whole body, we could say color. And then instead of typing the hexadecimal number, what we can do is just type this, type var parentheses, and then we would put the variable of dash dash gray like that. And then one of the things you'll notice is that the type has changed to gray, which is great. And let's see if we can find some other. And then now you'll see that that's all gray. If I wanted to change that variable to magenta, then you see that now it's all updated to magenta, which is really great. Then I don't have to constantly remember that hex number. I'm going to go ahead and change it back to gray. because I think that's what we're going to probably end up using. All right, so I wanted to just explain that. Another thing that is true is that there's also, I went ahead and I put the box sizing in because you're going to have to do it anyway. And the HTML has something on it. It says overflow Y, scroll, and then something called scroll behavior smooth. There is, in the newer versions of browsers, support for a CSS feature for smooth scrolling behavior. When you click on something, and it used to be that it was only through JavaScript that you could have that feature, but now you can do that through CSS. And the way that you do it is on the HTML document, you would put that you want the scroll value to be applied to the overflow Y property, so the vertical property. You could also do it on the horizontal one if you had horizontal scrolling, but we don't. And then you want that scroll behavior to behave as smooth. And then I have put a note here that says to make the above scroll properties and values that I just determined here, to make those effective, you also have to add the following to, and if you scroll over here, you'll see the body rule, right? So I'm actually going to show you how to do that. You could just literally take these and you could copy them right now so that you don't have to type it, but you would come down here to the body rule. I don't want to just put it there because I want you to actually think about this and I want you to actually apply it. So if I were to put that there, I'm going to go ahead and save my file. Now if I come up here, for instance, and I were to click on, let's say, click on the agenda link, you see that now it scrolls smoothly. If I were to remove what I just did, let's comment this out. I'm going to put a comment around that. And then I were to try to do that again. If I click on location, well, it's actually working now. Okay, so one of the things that's true, let me see if I take this off. One of the things that's true is that some browsers will still do it with this without the body piece that I just added, and a lot of them won't. But if I just take this off right here, I comment that out, you'll see that it would do the thing that we don't like, which is, let's go to sponsors, and see it just jumped. And that can be confusing. The scroll behavior sometimes can be very helpful because then it gives somebody the idea, like the context, that they are in fact in the same document. So I'm going to take the comments off of those two things that I had just commented out, and I'm going to save this again, and then we'll do a test again, and then now you can see that it's doing a smooth scroll, which is great. Okay, so those are the things that I wanted to definitely kind of give you like a little bit of a, I don't know, heads up about in the CSS before we get started. The other thing you'll notice is that I have comments that are set up to sort of designate a lot of major styling sections or areas within that CSS file. Last two things is that underneath the About section, one of the things that I wanted to do is also provide you later, just to make it easier, the link to our gradient that we're going to use for, and you can see the web link here, and we'll talk about that later, but it's for the part where in our Figma file right here, it provides that gradient right here so that it blends in with the tab color of our navigation. And so that gradient is being represented, it's going to be represented here under a rule that we're going to create to fade it out. And it's going to be the gradient that you use that's at this web address. Okay. And lastly, I also included the beginning of the rule for a media query so that it will change at about 650 pixels. Whenever we hit 650 and get bigger than that, then that means it's going to jump and change. And we'll deal with that much later. For right now, I just have it in the file and it's ready there for you in case you need it later or when you need it later, but you don't have to do anything with it right now. Okay, so this is going to be a good introduction so that you can get started, and we will deal with excuse me, what is in each of these HTML sections, or portions I should say, as we address them. So in the next video, we're going to start tackling the header.